She had exactly 3 seconds to live. 1. The bread slipped from her fingers. 2. Footsteps stopped behind her. 3. Turn around. Waverly turned. The man in the doorway had eyes like winter graves. She wasn't walking out of this room. "Please," she whispered. "I have 2 children at home. Not mine, but mine. If I don't come back." The man studied her. Then he smiled. What happened next shattered everything she expected. The alarm on Waverly's phone went off at 4:47 a.m. Not 4:45 a.m., 5 o'clock. 4:47, because at 4:45 she would hit snooze. At 5 o'clock she would already be late. But 4:47, that strange specific number, forced her brain to engage, to think, to remember why she couldn't afford to stay in bed even 1 minute longer. She had exactly 13 minutes to get dressed, check on her siblings, and leave for her first job of the day. The apartment was cold. It was always cold now. The heating had been shut off 2 months ago, right around the time their father had decided that a sure thing at the track was more important than paying the utility bill. Waverly had learned to layer blankets. She'd learned to stuff towels under the doors. She'd learned to tell her little brother and sister that it was cozy this way, like camping, like an adventure. She'd learned to lie. In the darkness of her tiny bedroom, a room that had once been a walk-in closet, converted when she'd given up her actual bedroom so her siblings could share something bigger, she pulled on 2 sweaters, a pair of jeans she'd worn for 4 days straight, and the sneakers with the hole in the left toe that she'd patched with duct tape and hope. The mirror on the back of the door showed her a ghost. 19 years old, but her eyes looked 40. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence beneath them. Her cheekbones were sharper than they'd been a year ago. Her collarbone jutted out in a way that her mother, if she were still alive, would have fretted over, would have tried to fix with extra helpings and gentle scolding. But her mother wasn't alive, and no one was coming to fix anything. Waverly turned away from the mirror and crept down the hallway toward her siblings' room. The door was cracked open. A nightlight in the shape of a cartoon moon cast pale yellow shadows across the 2 small beds, pushed together in the corner. On the left, buried under a mountain of mismatched blankets, 7-year-old Bridger slept with his thumb hovering near his mouth, a habit he'd mostly broken, but returned to when he was scared or hungry. He'd been doing it a lot lately. On the right, curled into a tight ball with her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, 9-year-old Marlowe breathed in the slow, steady rhythm of deep sleep. Waverly watched them for a moment, just a moment. This was the only time of day when they looked peaceful. The only time when the worry lines didn't crease Marlowe's forehead, when Bridger's stomach wasn't growling loud enough to hear across the room, when they weren't asking questions she didn't have answers to. When is Papa coming home? Why can't we have cereal for breakfast anymore? Are we going to be okay? She didn't have answers. She only had 4:47 alarms and duct-taped shoes and a desperate, clawing determination to keep them fed, keep them safe, keep them together. Their father couldn't take that from her. Nobody could. Waverly pressed a silent kiss to her fingertips, touched the door frame like a prayer, and slipped out into the cold morning. Here is what Waverly Sinclair earned in a typical week. Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. Cleaning offices in the business district. $9.50 an hour, cash, under the table. No benefits, no breaks, no complaints allowed. $142.50, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., helping at Mrs. Patterson's daycare down the street, not officially employed, just assisting, which meant $6 an hour and the occasional leftover snacks she could smuggle home to her siblings. $90, plus whatever goldfish crackers she could pocket. Tuesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., stocking shelves at a discount grocery store. Minimum wage, taxed, which meant the check was always smaller than she calculated. Roughly $85. Saturdays, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., deep cleaning houses for a service that hired anyone desperate enough not to ask questions. $96. Sundays, she was supposed to rest. She usually picked up whatever shift she could find. In a good week, Waverly brought home somewhere between $400 and $450. Here is what $450 had to cover. Rent, $875 a month. They were 3 months behind. The landlord, Mr. Whitmore had stopped calling. His lawyer had started writing. Electricity, $120. Still on, but the disconnect notice sat on the kitchen counter like a threat. Water, $45. Paid. Barely. Food. Whatever was left was never enough. The math didn't work. Waverly knew the math didn't work. She'd sat up countless nights with a calculator and a notebook, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that refused to fit, trying to find some combination that would make sense, that would keep them housed and fed and together. But the numbers were cruel. The numbers didn't care that she was 19 years old and raising 2 children who weren't hers. The numbers didn't care that their mother had died of cancer 18 months ago, slowly and painfully, and without the insurance that might have saved her. The numbers didn't care that their father had fallen apart afterward. Or maybe he'd always been this way, and their mother had just been skilled at hiding it, at protecting them from the truth of who he really was. The numbers only cared about themselves. And the numbers said, "You are losing." Holden Sinclair came home at 2:34 in the morning. Waverly knew because she'd been lying awake, listening, counting the hours since he'd disappeared 2 days ago, with the last $60 from the jar she kept hidden in the back of the kitchen cabinet. She'd moved the hiding spot 3 times. He always found it. The front door opened with a crash. He was never quiet when he was drunk, and he was always drunk these days, and she heard him stumble through the living room, knocking into the coffee table, cursing under his breath, in a mixture of Spanish and slurred English. Mari. He was standing in her doorway. She could smell him from across the room, cigarettes and cheap whiskey, and the particular staleness of a man who hadn't showered in days, who hadn't cared enough to shower, who had stopped caring about anything except the next card, the next race, the next desperate bet that would surely be the one to turn everything around. Mari, I need... No. She didn't sit up, didn't turn on the light, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her fully awake, fully aware, fully exhausted. It's just for a few days. I've got a line on something. Paco told me about this dog in the 3rd race at... There's no money. There's always money somewhere. Your mother used to... Don't. The word came out sharp enough to cut. Don't talk about her. Don't you dare talk about her. Silence. Heavy, resentful. For a moment, Waverly thought he might actually apologize, might actually see himself the way she saw him, a shell of the man their mother had married, hollowed out by grief, and filled back up with addiction. But Holden Sinclair hadn't apologized for anything in 18 months. He wasn't going to start now. "You've gotten cold," he muttered. "Hard. Just like she was at the end." Waverly closed her eyes. She heard him shuffle away, heard him collapse onto the couch in the living room, his bed now, since she'd put a lock on the master bedroom to keep him from rifling through their mother's things, and within minutes, his snoring rattled through the thin walls. Her mother had not been cold. Her mother had been the warmest person Waverly had ever known. Her mother had worked double shifts and still found time to braid Marlowe's hair, had helped Bridger with his reading, even when the chemo left her so tired she could barely keep her eyes open, had held Waverly's hand in the hospital, and made her promise to keep her siblings safe. "No matter what happens to me, Mari, no matter what your father does, you keep them safe, you keep them together. Promise me." "I promise, Mama. They need you. They're going to need you." "I know. And you need to remember that you're allowed to need people too. Don't carry everything alone. Don't become an island. Promise me that too." But that was one promise Waverly hadn't been able to keep, because islands don't ask for help. And neither did she. The final 7 days before everything changed were a blur of exhaustion and hunger and small, accumulating catastrophes. On Monday, Marlowe came home from school with a note about an unpaid field trip fee. $15. Waverly didn't have $15. She forged their father's signature on a form requesting a fee waiver, hoped the school secretary wouldn't look too closely, and sent Marlowe back with a smile that felt like cracking glass. On Tuesday, Bridger asked why they were having rice and beans for dinner again. "Because it's yummy," Waverly said. "It's not yummy. It's boring. Boring is okay sometimes. But why can't we have— Eat your dinner, Emmy. He did, but he only ate half, and she found the other half hidden under his bed later that night, wrapped in a napkin. He was saving it. In case there wasn't breakfast. 7 years old, and he was already learning to hoard food. Waverly sat on the floor of his room for 20 minutes after that, crying silently so she wouldn't wake him. On Wednesday, the envelope from the landlord's lawyer arrived. Not Mr. Whitmore this time, an actual, firm, actual letterhead. Actual words like eviction proceedings and court date and 30 days to vacate. 30 days. 30 days to find $2,625. 3 months of back rent, or watch her siblings become homeless. On Thursday, she picked up an extra shift at the cleaning service. On Friday, their father found her new hiding spot. He took everything. $84. $84 that was supposed to be groceries for 2 weeks, gone. By Saturday morning, the refrigerator contained half a carton of expired milk, 3 eggs, and a jar of peanut butter with approximately 2 tablespoons left at the bottom. Waverly made the eggs for her siblings. She told them she'd already eaten. She hadn't. By Saturday night, her hands were shaking. Low blood sugar. She knew the signs. Had been dancing with them for months, pushing herself further and further, eating less and less, so that Marlowe and Bridger could have more. But this was different. This was worse. This was the wall she'd been running toward since her mother died. And now she was pressed against it, nowhere left to go. No more solutions, no more workarounds, no more hope held together with duct tape and desperation. She couldn't pay the rent. She couldn't feed her siblings. She couldn't save them. And that was when Waverly Sinclair, who had never broken a law in her life, who had always followed the rules, who had believed that hard work and determination would be enough, made a decision. She was going to steal. The restaurant was called Bellini's. It sat on the corner of 8th and Madison, in the part of the city where men wore suits that cost more than Waverly earned in a year, where women carried purses that could have paid off her family's entire debt, where the very air smelled like money and power, and things that would never belong to someone like her. Waverly had walked past Bellini's 1,000 times. She'd looked through the windows at the white tablecloths and the gleaming silverware and the people laughing over wine that cost more per glass than she paid for a week's worth of groceries. She'd never imagined going inside. But the cleaning service had a contract with the building next door, and last Tuesday, one of the other cleaners, a woman named Loretta, who'd been doing this work for 30 years, had mentioned something in passing. Bellini's throws out more food in one night than I eat in a month. Shameful, really, all that waste. They throw it out, every night, into the dumpster out back. Perfectly good bread, vegetables, sometimes even meat. I've seen it. That night, Waverly had walked past the restaurant at 11:30 p.m., just as the kitchen was closing. Loretta was right. The dumpster behind Bellini's was a treasure chest, loaves of fresh bread that had gone unsold, vegetables deemed not pretty enough for plating, containers of soup that hadn't been ordered, all of it destined for the garbage. Waverly had taken what she could carry, fed her siblings for 3 days. She went back the following week, and the week after that. And now, on this Saturday night, the night everything was falling apart, the night she'd run out of options, the night the eviction notice sat on her kitchen counter like a death sentence, she was going back again. But this time, she wasn't going to wait for them to throw the food away. This time, she was going in while the kitchen was still open. The service entrance to Bellini's was propped open with a milk crate. Waverly had been watching for an hour, hidden in the shadows of the alley, counting the rhythm of the kitchen's activity. Servers came and went. A dishwasher stepped out for a cigarette break. A delivery driver dropped off produce. At 9:47 p.m., there was a gap. 3 minutes when no one was near the back door. 3 minutes when the kitchen was occupied with the dinner rush. 3 minutes to slip inside, grab what she could, and disappear. "You don't have to do this," whispered the voice in her head that still sounded like her mother. "There's another way. There's always another way." But there wasn't. She'd looked for another way. She'd worked 4 jobs and begged for extra shifts and skipped meals and sold everything they owned that anyone would buy. There was no other way. There was only this. Waverly pulled the hood of her sweatshirt up, kept her head down, and walked through the back door of Bellini's like she belonged there. The kitchen was chaos. Controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Men in white coats shouted orders. Pans sizzled and clattered. The air was thick with steam and the smell of garlic and butter, and things that made Waverly's empty stomach clench with desperate hunger. No one looked at her. That was the trick she'd learned. Move like you belong. Don't hesitate. Don't make eye contact. Blend into the background noise of a busy room. Become part of the scenery. Invisible. She'd been invisible her whole life. Might as well use it. The storage room was at the end of a narrow hallway, past the dishwashing station, through a door marked Supplies. Waverly had seen servers going in and out. It was where they kept the bread baskets, the extra napkins, the overflow from the main pantry. She slipped through the door, closed it behind her, and for a moment just stood there. The room was cool and dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb overhead. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with more food than Waverly had seen in months. Bags of flour, jars of sauce, cans of tomatoes. And there, on the middle shelf, a row of fresh bread loaves, still warm from the oven. Her hands were trembling. Just take it and go. Don't think, just go. She reached for the bread, and that was when she felt the shadow fall over her. Don't move. The voice came from behind her, deep, quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be loud because everyone knew to listen anyway. Waverly's hand froze halfway to the bread, every muscle in her body locked into place, paralyzed by a terror so complete it felt like drowning. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her lungs forgot how to work, the edges of her vision went gray. This is it, this is how it ends. She'd heard the rumors about Bellini's, everyone in the neighborhood had. The restaurant was a front, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a legitimate business that just happened to be owned by people who operated in shadows, who solved problems in ways that didn't involve police reports or insurance claims, who made people disappear when those people became inconvenient. The Thorns. Bellini's belonged to the Thorns, and Waverly had just been caught stealing from them. Turn around. She couldn't. Her legs wouldn't obey. I said turn around. Slowly, so slowly it felt like moving through water. She turned. The man standing in the doorway was tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes the color of granite. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been sewn onto his body. No tie, the top button of his shirt undone in a way that suggested he'd been working late. He looked like money. He looked like power. He looked like the kind of man who had never once in his life had to steal bread to feed someone he loved. The bread slipped from Waverly's fingers. She watched it fall, bouncing once, twice, rolling across the concrete floor until it came to rest against his Italian leather shoes. Say something. Explain. Make him understand. But her mouth had stopped working. Her voice was gone. Everything was gone. Please. She didn't recognize the sound that came out of her, thin and broken and barely a whisper. Please. It's not for me. The man didn't respond. He just stood there, watching her with those unreadable gray eyes, his expression revealing nothing. And Waverly, who had held herself together through her mother's death and her father's abandonment, and 18 months of impossible survival, felt herself finally break. Not for you. He repeated her words back to her. Not a question exactly, more like he was testing them, examining them, trying to determine whether they were true or just the desperate lie of someone caught with their hand in the wrong jar. Waverly nodded. Who then? His voice was calm, measured. There was no anger in it, not yet, but there was something else. Something she couldn't identify. Her throat constricted. My brother and sister. You have siblings? Yes. How old? 7, 9. A pause. Something flickered in those granite eyes, too fast to catch, too subtle to name. And they're hungry. It wasn't a question this time. Yes. So you came to steal from me. I didn't. She swallowed hard. I didn't know it was yours. I mean, I heard the rumors, but I wasn't trying to. Relax. The word cut through her panic like a blade. I didn't ask for explanations. I asked who the food was for. You answered. Waverly stared at him. She'd expected anger, violence. She'd expected to be dragged out of the storage room and taught a lesson about what happened to people who stole from the wrong family. She hadn't expected him to just stand there. "What's your name?" "Waverly." It came out automatically, a reflex. "Waverly Sinclair." "Sinclair." He rolled the name around like he was memorizing it. "And your siblings, they're waiting for you right now?" "Yes." "At home. They're asleep. I told them I was—" She stopped, caught herself. "It doesn't matter what I told them. You told them you'd bring food. Yes. And instead you're going to bring them nothing because you got caught." The words landed like punches. Waverly felt the tears start to burn at the back of her eyes. She blinked them away, refused to let them fall. She'd cried enough in the darkness of her own room. She wasn't going to cry here, in front of this stranger, in front of this man who held her fate in his hands. "Just do what you're going to do," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Call the police, or handle it yourself, however you handle things, but please—" She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Whatever you do to me, leave them out of it. They're children. They don't know anything about this. They don't deserve to—" "Stop." He held up one hand. "I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer them, honestly. Can you do that?" Waverly nodded. "Where are your parents?" The question hit her like a physical blow, like he'd reached into her chest and squeezed the place where grief still lived, raw and tender, and never fully healed. "My mother is dead." She said it flatly, the way you say something when you've had to say it too many times, when the words have lost their edges but the pain behind them hasn't faded at all. "And your father, he's—" How did you explain Holden Sinclair? How did you explain the slow-motion disintegration of a man who had once, maybe, been decent? The gambling debts, the empty bottles, the stolen grocery money, the nights he didn't come home, the mornings he came home reeking of whiskey and cigarettes and failure. "He's alive," Waverly finally said. "But he's not a father, not anymore. He doesn't provide for you. No. He doesn't protect you. No. He takes from you." She flinched. It was such a precise way to describe it. He takes from you, like he could see straight through to the hiding spots that kept being found, the money that kept disappearing, the hope that kept dying. "How long have you been doing this?" the man asked. "Taking care of them alone." "Since my mother died, 18 months. And before that, she was sick for a long time. I helped, but she was still—" Waverly's voice cracked. "She was still the one holding everything together. I was just her assistant, and then she was gone and suddenly there was no one holding anything, and my father—" She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. The man nodded slowly, his expression still unreadable but somehow different, like a door had opened behind his eyes, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to see. "You were 16, he said, "when you became responsible for them. Almost 17 years old, raising 2 children, working how many jobs? 4, sometimes 5 jobs." He repeated it like he needed to hear it twice. "And it's still not enough." No. The word came out like a confession, like the admission of failure she'd been fighting against for 18 months. "It's never enough. I try. I keep trying, but the rent is too high and food is too expensive, and he keeps taking—" Her voice broke completely. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over, tracking hot lines down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I know it's not an excuse. I know stealing is wrong. I know. Do you know why people steal food?" The question stopped her mid-spiral. "What?" "People steal food," the man said. "Because they're hungry, or because someone they love is hungry. There's nothing complicated about it, nothing mysterious. Hunger is one of the most basic forces in the world. It makes people do things they would never otherwise do." He paused. "I don't punish hunger." Waverly stared at him. The words didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I don't understand." "You will." He took a step back from the doorway. "Pick up the bread." She hesitated. "Go on, pick it up." Slowly, her hands shaking, Waverly bent down and retrieved the loaf from the floor. Now, the man said, you're going to follow me. You're going to answer a few more questions, and then you're going to take that bread and everything else you need home to your siblings. He turned and walked out of the storage room, and Waverly, who had stopped believing in miracles the night her mother died, followed him. His name was Cormac Thorne. She learned that from the nameplate on the desk in the office he led her to, a small, neat room behind the kitchen with dark wood furniture and walls lined with photographs of the restaurant through the decades. He didn't sit behind the desk. Instead, he leaned against the front of it, arms crossed, watching her with that same unreadable expression as she stood awkwardly near the door, still clutching the bread like it might disappear if she let go. Tell me about your mother. The request caught her off guard. What? Your mother? What was she like? For a long moment, Waverly couldn't speak. No one had asked her about her mother in months. People stopped asking after a while. They moved on. They forgot. They assumed you had too. But you didn't forget. You never forgot. She was... Waverly searched for the right words. She was strong. The strongest person I ever knew. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, and still made it to every one of Marlowe's school plays. She helped Bridger learn to ride a bike. She taught me how to cook, how to budget, how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Her voice softened. She was sick for almost 2 years before she died. Breast cancer. It spread. By the end, she could barely sit up, but she still... Waverly's throat tightened. She still made sure we knew we were loved every single day, even when she was in so much pain she couldn't hide it anymore. Cormac said nothing. He just listened. She made me promise to take care of them. Waverly continued. Before she died, she held my hand and made me promise that no matter what happened, I would keep them safe, keep them together. And your father? The word father tasted bitter in her mouth. He fell apart when she got sick. Or maybe he was always broken and she was just good at hiding it. I don't know, but by the time she died... She shook her head. There was nothing left of him, just the drinking, the gambling, the excuses. Does he hurt them, your siblings? Not physically. She hesitated. But there are other ways to hurt children. Neglect is its own kind of violence. Cormac's jaw tightened. It was the first real reaction she'd seen from him. And you've been handling all of this alone. There's no one else. No family, aunts, uncles, grandparents. My mother was an only child. Her parents died before I was born. My father's family. Waverly laughed bitterly. They cut him off years ago. They don't even know we exist. Friends? I don't have time for friends. Your mother's friends, your neighbors, everyone has their own problems. She said it simply, without self-pity, just stating a fact. Everyone has their own problems. Everyone is surviving. No one has room to carry someone else's weight. Cormac studied her for a long moment. Then he pushed off from the desk and walked to the door. Wait here. He was gone before she could respond. He was back within minutes. But he wasn't alone. A woman followed him into the office, middle-aged, with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair. She carried a large paper bag in her arms, and behind her came a younger man with 2 more bags. This is Shiloh, Cormac said. She manages the kitchen. And this is Beckett. They're going to help you. Waverly shook her head, confused. Help me with what? Shiloh stepped forward and set the bag on the desk. Food, she said simply. Enough for a week, maybe more. Bread, vegetables, pasta, sauce, some chicken from tonight's service, and... She pulled out a smaller bag from inside the first one. Snacks, for the little ones, cookies, fruit, things children like. Waverly stared at the bags, stared at them like they were hallucinations, like if she blinked they would disappear, like this couldn't possibly be real because nothing this good had happened to her in 18 months. I can't. She shook her head. I can't accept this. You can, Cormac said, and you will. But I stole from you. I broke in here and you walked through an open door and picked up a loaf of bread. His voice was matter-of-fact. That's not the crime you think it is. It's still nothing compared to what's been done to you. The words landed like a stone in the still water. What's been done to you? Like she was the victim here, like her father's neglect and the world's indifference were the real crimes, not her desperate grab for bread. Take the food, Cormac said. Take it home to your siblings. Feed them. Let them sleep with full stomachs tonight. But this isn't charity. He cut her off before she could protest again. And it's not pity. It's practicality. You need food. We have food. The math is simple. What do you want in return? The question came out sharper than she intended, because nothing was ever free. Nothing in Waverly's world came without strings, without catches, without the eventual realization that what looked like help was actually a trap. Cormac met her eyes. I want you to come back here on Monday, he said. Noon. There's a job open in the kitchen. Prep work, cleaning, chopping, whatever Shiloh needs. It pays better than whatever you're doing now, and it comes with meals. A job, a legitimate job, with a real paycheck, taxes and everything. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why would you do this? Why would you help me? Why, when you don't even know me, when I was just trying to steal from you, why? Cormac was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, lower, like he was accessing something he didn't often share. I know what it's like to grow up too fast, he said. To have responsibilities that don't belong to a child, to be handed a weight you never asked to carry. He paused. I also know what it's like to watch someone you love choose their own destruction over their family. Waverly's breath caught. You don't owe me your story, Cormac continued. I'm not asking for it. But I know what I see when I look at you. I see someone who refuses to break, even when everything around them is breaking. I see someone who deserves a chance. He nodded toward the bags of food. Take the chance. The bags were heavy, heavier than anything Waverly had carried in months, not because the food was physically that dense, but because of what it represented. Hope. She'd forgotten how heavy hope could be. The walk home took 20 minutes, through the nicer part of town, past the boutiques and restaurants that catered to people whose lives were uncomplicated by things like eviction notices and empty refrigerators. Then down into the neighborhood where Waverly had grown up, where the streetlights flickered and the buildings sagged, and the air always smelled faintly of exhaust and disappointment. Her building was dark except for a single light in Mrs. Pemberton's window on the second floor. Mrs. Pemberton, who used to bring them cookies when their mother was alive. Mrs. Pemberton, who had stopped coming around after the funeral, like grief was contagious, like Waverly's family had become something to avoid instead of something to embrace. Everyone has their own problems. Waverly climbed the stairs to the third floor. The apartment was quiet. Her father must have gone out again. The couch was empty. The blanket she'd left there folded exactly as she'd placed it. Small mercies. At least she wouldn't have to explain where the food came from, wouldn't have to fight him off from taking it. She set the bags on the kitchen counter as quietly as she could. Then she just stood there for a moment, looking at them. This is real. This is actually happening. Someone helped me. It felt like a miracle. It felt like her mother's hand, reaching down from wherever she was, pressing against the small of Waverly's back, pushing her forward, telling her to keep going. Mija, keep going. You're not alone. You were never alone. Tears streamed down her face, silent ones this time. Not the desperate, heaving sobs of breakdown, but the quiet, cleansing tears of relief, of gratitude, of something that might, someday, if she was lucky, become joy again. Waverly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Then she opened the refrigerator, pulled out the old milk, and the withered vegetables, and the empty containers of nothing, and began to fill it with food. Bridger woke first. Waverly heard him padding down the hallway in his two big pajamas, hand-me-downs from a neighbor's kid. Heard him stop in the doorway of the kitchen, heard the sharp little intake of breath when he saw what was on the table. Mari. She turned from the stove, where she was scrambling eggs. Real eggs with cheese, and there was bread in the toaster, and the smell of something actually cooking, instead of something being reheated from a can. Good morning, Emmy. How did... He was staring at the food, at the fruit in the bowl on the counter, at the loaf of bread she'd sliced into thick pieces, at the abundance of it all. Come eat, she said, before it gets cold. He didn't move. Marie, is this ours? Or did someone leave it by mistake? Because if it's not ours, we should give it back. It's ours, Emmy. She crossed the kitchen and knelt in front of him, taking his small hands in hers. "It's ours, I promise. Someone helped us, a kind person. And now we have food, and you're going to eat a real breakfast, and you're not going to save any of it under your bed, okay? There's enough. There's going to be enough." His lower lip trembled. "You found the rice." "Yes, baby, I found the rice. I wasn't trying to hide it. Sometimes there's no breakfast, and I know." She pulled him into a hug, pressing her face against his hair, breathing in the smell of little boy's sleep and fading baby shampoo. "I know why you did it, but you don't have to do it anymore, okay? You don't have to worry about that." He nodded against her shoulder. "Okay, now go wake up your sister. Tell her there's eggs." He pulled back, his face still uncertain, but just starting, to show something that looked like hope. "With cheese?" "With cheese. And toast?" "And toast. And, yes, Bridger, and orange juice. Now go, before I eat all of it myself." He went, running down the hallway, shouting Marlowe's name, his voice high and excited, in a way Waverly hadn't heard in months. She turned back to the stove and let herself smile. Waverly showed up at Bellini's at 11:45 a.m. 15 minutes early. She'd agonized over what to wear, eventually settling on the cleanest version of her usual uniform. Dark jeans, a black long-sleeved shirt, her hair pulled back in a tight braid. Professional, but practical, ready to work. The service entrance was propped open with the same milk crate as before, but this time Shiloh was waiting for her just inside, a warm smile on her face and an apron already in her hands. "You came." "I said I would. Plenty of people say things." Shiloh handed her the apron. Not everyone follows through. The kitchen was quieter than it had been on Saturday night. No dinner rush, no chaos, just the steady rhythm of lunch prep. Shiloh introduced her to the rest of the staff. Sullivan, who handled the grill. Ainsley, the pastry chef. Jasper, who washed dishes, with the kind of meditative focus that suggested he'd been doing it for decades. They were welcoming without being effusive. Professional. Kind. By the end of the first hour, Waverly had chopped 3 bags of onions, diced 6 pounds of tomatoes, and minced enough garlic to ward off an army of vampires. Her hands ached, her back ached, and she'd never been happier. The days settled into a pattern. Waverly dropped her siblings at school by 8 a.m. She worked at the office cleaning job until 10:30. Then she took 2 buses to Bellini's, where she worked from 11 until the dinner rush ended, sometimes 9 p.m., sometimes later. The pay was better than she'd expected. Shiloh had been vague about the exact numbers during that first meeting, but when Waverly got her first paycheck, she had to look at it 3 times to make sure she was reading it correctly. It was almost double what she'd been making from all her other jobs combined. This is too much, she'd thought. There's been some kind of mistake. But when she asked Shiloh, the older woman just shrugged. "Mr. Thorne sets the wages. Take it up with him." Waverly didn't take it up with him. She saw Cormac occasionally, arriving for evening service, meeting with suppliers, speaking quietly with Shiloh about things that were none of Waverly's business. But he never made a point of seeking her out, never asked how she was doing, never reminded her of the debt she must surely owe him. He just let her work, let her earn, let her start to rebuild. The eviction notice was addressed first. $875 for the current month, $1,750 for the back rent, paid in 2 installments, that Mr. Whitmore accepted with obvious relief. By the end of her first month at Bellini's, the threat of homelessness had been lifted. Food came next. The refrigerator, once empty, now held staples: eggs, milk, bread, vegetables, fruit. Shiloh sent Waverly home with extras most nights. Leftovers that would otherwise be thrown away, she claimed, though Waverly suspected the portions were deliberately larger than any actual leftovers would be. The heating came back on. The electricity bill was paid. Marlowe got new shoes for school. Not expensive ones, but ones that fit, ones without holes, ones that didn't cause blisters or shame. Bridger stopped hiding food under his bed. Slowly, incrementally, impossibly, life became livable again. Holden Sinclair noticed the changes. Of course he did. A man who had learned to track every dollar in his household, not to provide for his family, but to identify what could be taken, what could be converted to gambling chips, or lottery tickets, or bets on horses he'd never seen run. That kind of man notices when the numbers start moving in a direction. He doesn't control. He started asking questions. Where'd you get that? Who paid for this? What aren't you telling me? Waverly deflected, lied, hid her new pay stubs in a locked box at Mrs. Pemberton's apartment. The neighbor had softened recently, had started bringing cookies again, had offered her spare key when Waverly admitted she needed somewhere safe to keep important papers. But deflection only works for so long. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks into her new job, Waverly came home to find her father sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. "You think I'm stupid," he said. "You think I don't know what's happening." Waverly set down the container of leftover pasta Shiloh had sent her home with. "I don't think anything, Papa. Don't call me that." His voice was sharp, bitter. "You lost the right to call me that when you started lying to my face." "I haven't lied." "Then where's the money coming from?" He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "The heat's back on. The fridge is full. Marlo has new shoes. You think I'm blind?" "I got a job." "You had jobs, plural. They didn't pay like this. This one's better." "Bullshit." He was in her space now, looming, using his height the way he always did when he wanted to intimidate. Waverly didn't flinch. She'd stopped flinching from him months ago. "You want to know where the money's coming from?" She kept her voice flat, controlled. "Fine, I'll tell you. I work at a restaurant, a real one, with real wages. I show up, I do my job, and they pay me. That's it." "What restaurant?" "That's none of your business. Everything in this family is my business." "No." She met his eyes. "It's not. Not anymore." For a moment he just stared at her. Then his hand shot out, not to strike her, not quite, but to grab her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You don't talk to me like that. Let go of me. I am your father. You are nothing." The words came out cold, certain, final. "You haven't been my father since Mama died. You haven't been anything since Mama died. You don't get to come home smelling like a bar and demand answers from me. You don't get to take what I've earned and gamble it away. You don't get to pretend you have any authority in this house when you haven't contributed anything except stress and fear and empty bottles for 18 months. She yanked her arm free. "This family survived without you. It's going to keep surviving without you. And if you don't like that, you can leave. But you don't get to touch me. You don't get to touch what's mine. And you don't get to act like a father when you've spent the last year and a half proving you're anything but." Holden's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, rage, something that might have been shame if he were still capable of feeling it. Then he left, slammed the door behind him, didn't come back that night, or the next, or the one after that. Cormac found out. Waverly didn't know how. She hadn't told anyone at the restaurant about her father's attempted confrontation, hadn't mentioned the bruises on her arm, hidden under long sleeves as always, hadn't breathed a word of any of it. But 2 days after Holden disappeared, Cormac appeared in the kitchen during her lunch break. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They walked through the service entrance, down the alley, out onto the street where the afternoon sun was warm and the city noise provided cover for quiet conversation. "Your father," Cormac said. "He's been causing problems." Waverly's stomach dropped. "What kind of problems?" "The kind that get noticed. He's been asking questions about you, about where you work, about how much you make." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Stop." Cormac held up a hand. "You didn't do anything wrong, but I need to know what you want to happen next." "What do you mean?" "I mean that your father is a liability, not just to you, to your siblings, to your stability, to the life you're trying to build. He's going to keep pushing, keep looking, keep trying to take what you've earned." Cormac paused. "Unless someone stops him." Waverly felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm not asking you to. I would never ask. I know what you're thinking." His voice was calm. "And that's not what I'm offering. I don't solve problems that way when there are simpler solutions." "What kind of simpler solutions?" "Your father has debts, large ones, to people who are less patient than I am." Cormac's expression was neutral, but there was something cold beneath it. "Those debts could be called in, all at once, which would make your city a very uncomfortable place for him to be. You want to make him leave?" "I want to give him a reason to leave, a financial incentive, the kind of incentive that comes with a strong suggestion that he never come back." Waverly was quiet for a long moment. Her father, The man who had held her when she was a baby, who had taught her to ride a bike, who had been, once upon a time, someone she loved without complication. But that man was gone. Had been gone for years. What remained was just a ghost, wearing his face, making choices that hurt everyone around him, unable or unwilling to change. Do it. The words came out steady. Make him leave. I don't want him near my siblings. I don't want him near me. I don't want... Her voice cracked. I don't want him to have the chance to destroy what we're rebuilding. Cormac nodded once. It's done. And it was. 3 days later, a moving van appeared outside their building. Holden Sinclair packed what little belonged to him, his clothes, his bottles, his stacks of losing lottery tickets, and left. He didn't say goodbye to his children. He didn't leave a forwarding address. He just vanished. And Waverly locked the door behind him, changed the locks for good measure, and let Dea herself feel something she hadn't felt in 18 months. Safe. 6 weeks after she walked into the storage room of Bellini's, Waverly cooked dinner for her siblings. A real dinner. Not rice and beans, not leftovers, not whatever she could scrape together from a nearly empty pantry. Roast chicken with crispy skin and herbs she'd learned to use from watching Shiloh. Mashed potatoes, smooth and buttery. Green beans sautéed with garlic. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven. The kind of meal their mother used to make on special occasions. The kind of meal Waverly had almost forgotten existed. Marlowe and Bridger sat at the table, their eyes wide, their faces reflecting the candlelight she'd lit, because it felt right, because it felt like something worth celebrating. It's so pretty, Marlowe whispered, like Christmas. Better than Christmas, Bridger said. At Christmas we have to share with Papa. The words hung in the air. Waverly felt her chest tighten. Papa's not coming back, she said gently. We talked about this. I know. Bridger's voice was matter of fact. I just meant, now we don't have to save any. He wasn't sad. Neither was Marlowe. That was the part that broke Waverly's heart and healed it at the same time. Her siblings had learned, the way children always learn, even when adults try to protect them, that their father's presence was something to be endured, not enjoyed, that he took more than he gave, that his absence was a relief, not a loss. What kind of father do you have to be for your children to be happier when you're gone? Let's eat, Waverly said, pushing the thought away, before it gets cold. They served themselves, real portions, heaping spoonfuls. No one asked if there would be enough. No one offered to take less so someone else could have more. No one slipped food into napkins to hide for later. They just ate, like normal children, like a normal family. For the first time in longer than Waverly could remember, it happened over dessert. Waverly had brought home cookies from the restaurant. Shiloh's recipe, chocolate chip with sea salt, still soft in the center. And Bridger was working on his third when he looked up at her with those big, serious eyes. Mari. Yeah, buddy. Are we going to be okay now? The question was so simple, so small, and it shattered her completely. She tried to answer, opened her mouth, felt the words catch in her throat, felt the tears start to burn at the back of her eyes the way they always did when she let herself feel too much. Are we going to be okay? It was the question she'd been asking herself every single day for 18 months. In the darkness before dawn, in the spaces between jobs, in the moments when the math didn't work, and the money ran out and there was nothing left but fear. Are we going to be okay? She'd never known the answer. She'd just kept going, kept fighting, kept showing up. Because stopping wasn't an option, because her siblings needed her, because she'd made a promise to her mother and she was not going to break it, no matter what it cost her. But now there was food in the refrigerator. Now there was money in the bank. Now there was a job that paid fairly and a boss who treated her with respect and a landlord who wasn't threatening eviction and a home that was finally warm again. Now there was hope. Yeah, Emmy. Her voice cracked on the words, but she forced them out anyway. I think we're going to be okay. Marlowe reached across the table and took her hand. Bridger nodded solemnly, like he'd been waiting to hear it, like he'd needed permission to believe it. And Waverly, who had been strong for so long, who had carried so much, who had refused to break even when breaking seemed like the only option, let herself cry. Not sad tears, not desperate tears. Relief, pure, overwhelming relief. because for the first time since her mother died, she actually believed it might be true. That night, after the dishes were done and the leftovers were put away and both siblings were tucked into bed with full stomachs and peaceful faces, Waverly sat alone in the living room. In her hands, she held a photograph. Her mother. Taken 3 years ago, before the diagnosis, before everything changed. She was laughing at something outside the frame, her head thrown back, her eyes crinkled at the corners, radiating a joy so pure it hurt to look at. "I did it, Mama," Waverly whispered. The photograph didn't answer. Of course it didn't. "I kept them safe. I kept them together. I kept my promise." The silence stretched. "I know you'd probably say, I should have asked for help sooner, should have let someone in, should have—" She laughed softly, wiping at her eyes. "Should have done a lot of things different. But I didn't know how. I didn't know who to trust." She traced the edge of the frame with her finger. "Someone helped me, Mama. A stranger. He didn't have to. There was no reason for him to, but he did, and I think maybe that was you, sending him, making sure I wasn't alone." The candle on the windowsill flickered. A draft, probably, or maybe something else. "I'm going to be okay," Waverly said. "We're all going to be okay, and I'm going to make you proud, I promise." She pressed the photograph to her heart, held it there, and finally, after 18 months of fighting alone, allowed herself to believe that the future might actually be bright. Across the street from Waverly's building, in a car park beneath a broken streetlight, Cormac Thorne sat in silence. He told himself he was just checking in, making sure the situation was handled, making sure the father was really gone, making sure the girl, the one with too much weight on her shoulders and not enough years to carry it, was going to be all right. That's what he told himself. But the truth was more complicated. The truth always was. Cormac had seen a lot in his 47 years, had done things he wasn't proud of, had made choices that left stains on his conscience, had built an empire on a foundation that, depending on who you asked, was either brilliant or monstrous, or some combination of both. He wasn't a good man. He knew that, but he also knew that goodness wasn't binary. That even men like him, men who operated in shadows, who spoke a language the rest of the world preferred not to hear, could choose in small moments to do something right. He'd chosen that the night he found Waverly in the storage room. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because he wanted something from her, he didn't. Not because helping her benefited him in any practical way, it hadn't. He'd chosen it because he'd seen himself in her eyes. The weight, the weariness, the absolute refusal to break. He'd carried that weight once, a long time ago, before he became the man the world feared. Cormac watched as the light in Waverly's window went dark. Watched as the building settled into sleep. Watched as the night wrapped itself around the neighborhood like a blanket. She's going to be okay. He didn't know why that mattered to him so much, only that it did. The morning came soft and gray, the way mornings often do in that part of the city. Waverly woke at 5:30 a.m. Not because her alarm went off, not because she had to, but because her body was used to it now, programmed by 18 months of survival, to be ready, always ready, for whatever came next. She lay in bed for a moment, just breathing, just existing, just letting herself feel the quiet miracle of a life that was finally starting to make sense. Then she got up, made coffee, started breakfast. And when Marlowe and Bridger stumbled into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed, bed-headed, still wearing the mismatched pajamas that made them look like tiny, adorable chaos gremlins, she gathered them into her arms and held them tight. "What's that for?" Marlowe mumbled into her shoulder. "Nothing." Waverly smiled. "Just love." "You're weird," Bridger said. "The weirdest." She let them go, set pancakes on the table, poured orange juice, and watched her siblings eat. This, she thought, this is what I was fighting for. This is what I nearly lost. This is everything. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars started their engines. Commuters hurried toward buses. Shop owners raised their gates. The endless machine of life churned on, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in every apartment, every home, every corner where someone was struggling or thriving, or just trying to make it through another day. But here, in this kitchen, in this moment, none of that mattered. Here, there was only family, not the family you were given, The family you chose, the family you built, the family you refused, no matter how hard the world pushed, to let slip away. There is a kind of strength that looks like breaking, that looks like stealing bread in the dead of night because there is no other way, that looks like working 4 jobs and skipping meals and lying to children so they don't have to carry fear that belongs to adults. That looks like standing in front of a stranger and saying, "Please, it's not for me." Waverly Sinclair had that strength. She'd had it all along. She just hadn't known what to call it. But here is what she learned. In those weeks and months of rebuilding, sometimes the people who save us are not the ones we expect. Sometimes kindness comes wrapped in danger. Sometimes the world breaks us down, not to destroy us, but to show us what we're made of. And sometimes, if we're lucky, if we're brave, if we refuse to stop fighting, we get to rebuild, not into what we were, into something better, something stronger, something that can finally rest.